actual nightmare family. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind of night where anything could happen. Sarah was driving home from a late shift at work, exhausted and eager to get home to her warm bed. She had always been nervous driving at night, especially when the weather was bad, but tonight was different. There was a strange feeling in the air, like something was watching her. As Sarah drove down the winding country road, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. She turned up the radio to drown out her thoughts, but the music only seemed to intensify her unease. The rain was coming down harder now, making it difficult to see the road ahead. Suddenly, Sarah saw something in her rearview mirror. It was a pair of headlights, shining bright and getting closer by the second. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to speed up, but the car behind her matched her every move. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was just a coincidence, but deep down she knew something wasn't right. The car behind her started flashing its headlights, blinding Sarah as she struggled to keep control of her own vehicle. She felt like she was in a horror movie, being chased by a crazed killer. She tried to stay calm, reminding herself that she was almost home, but the car behind her wouldn't let up. As Sarah approached a sharp turn in the road, she made the split-second decision to take a different route. She turned off onto a dirt road, hoping that the car behind her wouldn't follow. But it did. Sarah's heart sank as she realized she was in trouble. The car behind her pulled up beside her, the driver's window rolling down to reveal a man with a sinister grin on his face. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to think of what to do next. She could see the darkness closing in around her, and she knew she was in danger. Just as Sarah thought it was all over, she saw a flash of blue lights in her rearview mirror. It was a police car. The man in the car beside her quickly sped off, disappearing into the night. The police officer pulled up beside Sarah and asked if she was okay. She explained what had happened, and the officer radioed for backup. Backup arrived shortly after, and Sarah was taken to the police station to give a statement. She was shaken up but relieved to be alive. The police promised to do everything in their power to catch the man who had been following her. Over the next few days, Sarah tried to put the incident behind her. She was grateful to be alive but couldn't help feeling paranoid whenever she was out driving at night. She had always been a cautious driver, but now she was extra vigilant, constantly checking her rearview mirror and looking for any signs of danger. One night, a week after the incident, Sarah was driving home from a friend's house when she saw something in her rearview mirror that made her blood run cold. It was the same car that had been following her that night in the storm. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to keep calm and think of what to do next. She knew she couldn't let the car catch up with her, so she tried to lose it by taking a series of turns down side streets. But no matter how many twists and turns she made, the car was always right behind her. Sarah was starting to panic. She didn't know what this person wanted from her or why they were following her again. Just as Sarah thought she was out of options, she saw a police car up ahead. She flashed her lights and honked her horn, trying to get the officer's attention. The police car pulled up beside her, and Sarah quickly explained the situation. The officer radioed for backup, and Sarah was instructed to pull over to the side of the road and wait for them to arrive. She watched as the car that had been following her sped off into the night. Sarah's heart was pounding, and she couldn't believe that this was happening to her again. When the backup arrived, Sarah gave a detailed description of the car and the person who had been following her. The police promised to do everything in their power to catch the person responsible, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The next few weeks were filled with anxiety and fear. Sarah was constantly looking over her shoulder, afraid that the person who had been following her would strike again. She barely slept, and her work suffered as a result. One day, while Sarah was walking home from the grocery store, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to see a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt and sunglasses, walking towards her. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to keep calm and think of what to do next. The man stopped in front of her and asked if she was Sarah. When she nodded, he handed her a piece of paper with a message written on it. The message read, "I know what you did. You can't hide from me." Sarah's knees buckled and she collapsed onto the ground. She didn't know what the message meant or who could have written it, but she knew that she was in grave danger. She called the police and they arrived on the scene quickly. They took Sarah's statement and promised to do everything in their power to catch the person responsible. Over the next few days, Sarah received several more threatening messages. She was afraid to leave her house, and her friends and family were worried about her. One day, while Sarah was at home, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, she saw the same man who had been following her before. He pushed his way into her house and held her at gunpoint. He told her that he knew what she had done and that she was going to pay for it. Sarah was confused and terrified. She didn't know what he was talking about or how to get out of the situation. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to figure out what the man was talking about. What had she done to deserve this? Was this all a mistake? Her thoughts were interrupted by the man's harsh voice. "You don't remember me, do you?" he said, pointing the gun at her head. "Well, I remember you. You ruined my life, and now I'm going to make you pay." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to remember if she had ever seen this man before, but his face was obscured by the hood of his sweatshirt, and his sunglasses made it impossible to see his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't lie to me," he spat. "You know exactly what you did." He pushed her further into the living room, and Sarah noticed that he was carrying a large backpack. She wondered what he had in there and what he was planning to do with it. The man forced Sarah to sit down on the couch, still holding the gun to her head. He then started to unpack the backpack, revealing a variety of weapons, including knives and ropes. Sarah's heart raced as she realized that he was planning to kill her. "What do you want from me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I want you to suffer like I suffered," he said, his voice filled with hatred. "I want you to feel the same pain and despair that I felt when you ruined my life." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to figure out what he was talking about. Had she really ruined someone's life without even realizing it? "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked again. Sarah shook her head, and the man let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you don't. You probably don't even remember what you did to me, but I'll never forget." He continued to unpack his backpack, taking out a roll of duct tape and a length of rope. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized what was about to happen. She knew she had to act fast if she wanted to survive. In a sudden burst of courage, Sarah lunged at the man, knocking the gun out of his hand. They struggled on the ground, rolling back and forth as Sarah tried to get the upper hand. Just as she thought she had the advantage, the man pulled out a knife and held it to her throat. Sarah froze, realizing that she had made a terrible mistake. "Nice try," he said, his breath hot on her face, "but you're not getting away that easily." Sarah closed her eyes, waiting for the inevitable, but just as the man was about to strike, there was a loud banging at the door. "Police, open up," a voice shouted. The man hesitated for a split second, and Sarah took advantage of the moment to kick him in the stomach. He stumbled backwards, giving her enough time to run towards the door. The police burst in just as Sarah reached the front door, and they quickly apprehended the man. Sarah collapsed onto the ground, tears streaming down her face as she realized how close she had come to death. Over the next few weeks, Sarah struggled to come to terms with what had happened. She couldn't believe that someone had been following her and planning to kill her. She wondered if she would ever feel safe again. But slowly, with the help of therapy and support from her loved ones, Sarah began to heal. She learned that the man who had attacked her was someone she had gone to school with, someone who had never gotten over a perceived slight she had made against him years ago. As Sarah continued her therapy sessions, she found herself becoming more and more comfortable opening up about her experience. The more she spoke about her fears, the less power they seemed to hold over her. She began to feel a sense of control over her life once again and started to make small steps towards reclaiming her independence. One of the first things Sarah did was to take a self-defense class. She had always felt vulnerable walking alone at night, and she wanted to be prepared if anything like this ever happened again. The class gave her a sense of empowerment and confidence, and she felt more capable of protecting herself. But despite all of these positive changes, Sarah still couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She became paranoid, constantly checking over her shoulder and feeling like she was being followed. It was hard for her to trust anyone, even her closest friends and family members. One day, while walking through a crowded shopping mall, Sarah spotted a man who looked familiar. Her heart started pounding, and she began to feel sick to her stomach. She couldn't be sure, but she thought it might be the man who had attacked her. Sarah quickly ducked into a nearby store and called the police. They arrived within minutes and took her statement, but they couldn't find the man she had seen. They assured her that they would do everything in their power to keep her safe, but Sarah still felt on edge. In the following, if you you enjoyed tonight's virtual nightmare, I hope the like and subscribe button haunt you tonight. Also, turn on all notifications to avoid being haunting. If you want to share your own virtual nightmare story, submit via Reddit or Instagram.